There's this one book that completely changed the way millions of people think about wealth, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Today, we're going to dig into its very first and maybe most powerful lesson. Let's get into it.
This right here, this is the whole game. It's a total shift in perspective that leads to two completely different financial lives. It proves it's not about your paycheck, it's about how that money gets into your pocket. For the author, Robert Kiyosaki, this whole idea started with getting totally opposite advice from two very different dads. So the story is basically this constant tug of war between two opposing worldviews. On one side, you've got his real dad, his poor dad, who was a super smart academic but, always struggled with money. And on the other side was his best friend's father, his rich dad, a guy who didn't even finish school but was on his way to becoming one of the richest men in Hawaii. And this slide just nails the difference between them. For poor dad, money was kind of scary, a source of problems. You see it in the language, right? I can't afford it. That's a dead end. It just stops all thinking. But for rich dad, money was a tool. His language opens up possibilities. How can I afford it? Well, that's a question that forces your brain to start looking for answers. You know how every big story has that one moment that kicks everything off? Well, for young Kiyosaki, this was it. That sting of being left out, not because of who he was, but because of what his family didn't have. That feeling lit a fire under him and sparked a simple question that would change his life. So, fired up from that experience, he decides he absolutely has to learn how to get rich. And this journey takes him not to a school, but to a really unconventional and honestly pretty brutal first lesson from his friend's rich dad. The first person he asks is his poor dad. And his dad, being a teacher, just says, use your head. But that wasn't really the answer he was looking for. Eventually, his dad suggested he go talk to his friend Mike's father, the man who'd become his rich dad. And that's when the real training started. Rich Dad's offer? Well, it was definitely not what you'd expect. No lectures, no books, just real-world experience. He put the boys to work right away, doing the most boring job imaginable, dusting canned goods in his store for a measly 10 cents an hour. Just 30 cents. That's all they got after 3 hours of work. Now, back in the 1950s, a comic book was 10 cents. So their entire Saturday morning of hard work was worth just 3 comic books. At first, the boys were thrilled, but that didn't last long. A few weeks later, that excitement turned into serious frustration. And this was the breaking point. Kiyosaki felt totally used, and frankly, he was angry. He signed up to learn, not to be cheap labor. He was ready to walk. But what he had no idea about was that this feeling, this anger, that was the first part of the lesson. Okay, so Kiyosaki storms into Rich Dad's office, totally ready to quit and demand more money. He's expecting a big fight. But what he got instead was a mind-blowing lesson in how to see the world differently. But Rich Dad, he doesn't even flinch. He doesn't apologize. Instead, he explains his whole philosophy. He says life is the best teacher because it pushes you around. That feeling of being underpaid and frustrated, that wasn't Rich Dad being a jerk. That was life trying to tell him something really important. And Rich Dad breaks it down like this. When life pushes you, most people react in one of two ways. They either just give up, or they get mad and blame someone else, their boss, their job, whatever. But a small few, they do something different. They see the push for what it is, a lesson, and they learn from it. And then comes the gut punch. Rich Dad tells him, I'm not the problem. Your tiny paycheck isn't the problem. The real problem, and the only thing you actually have the power to change, is you. It's not about the situation you're in, it's about how you choose to react to it. So, after getting hit with that piece of wisdom, it starts to sink in for Kiyosaki. He gets it. Blaming his boss isn't going to fix anything. Asking for a raise is just a short-term fix. So he asks the right question. If that's not the answer, then what is? And Rich Dad just gently taps him on the head. The answer isn't a bigger paycheck. It's a smarter brain. The solution is to stop chasing after money and start understanding how money really, truly works. And that leads us to the core lesson of this entire book. And boom, there it is, lesson number 1. The whole miserable experience of working for 10 cents an hour, it was never about the money. It was designed to make him feel the pain of the trap of working for money.
It was basically a miniature version of what most people do their entire lives, just trading their time for a paycheck that's never quite enough.
But look, knowing the rule is one thing. Actually living it, that's the real challenge. So Rich Dad immediately threw a new test at the boys to see if they really got it.
Rich Dad lays it out. Most people's entire financial lives are driven by just two things: fear and greed. They take a job out of fear of not paying their bills. Then, once they get a paycheck, greed and desire kick in, and they start thinking about all the cool stuff they can buy. It's a never-ending cycle. The alternative? Let passion drive you. A real passion for learning, not a fear of being broke.
So Rich Dad sees that the light bulb is finally starting to go on for these kids. Their desire to learn is real. So he offers to keep teaching them on Saturdays. But this new offer had a pretty shocking twist.
Yup. Zero. Nada. He told them to keep working, just like before, but he wasn't going to pay them a single dime. Now this is where it gets crazy, right? Why on earth would anyone agree to that? But the logic behind it was just brilliant. By taking the paycheck out of the equation completely, he was forcing their brains to find other ways to make money. He was breaking that automatic link between work and paycheck. He was teaching them to spot opportunities that people who are just focused on their salary are completely blind to. And that's really what it all boils down to. It all comes back to this one question that really we should all ask ourselves: why are you really working? Is it just for that paycheck at the end of the week? Or are you there to learn,